speaker. Our first speaker is Alexandra Smothers. Many of us are not living the life we dreamed of. Some of us want to be actors, writers, artists, and instead we indulge in distractions and fantasies that do not serve us or anyone around us.
Rick disappear?
I'm right here. Are you guys not seeing me?
I think Chris froze for a second.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry to interrupt that. Today, Alexandra will share with us keys to manifesting healthy creativity for us and the world. The title of her speech is The Artist's Way, Part 1. Alexandra Smothers.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, fellow Toastmasters. It's an honor to be here and to share with you the wisdom that I am learning in this moment. How many of you Toastmasters have a passion to create, but you haven't tapped into it? You've got something that you want to create. You want to be creative, but you haven't been able to. Anyone here? Anyone else? Rick? Deborah? Few of us? Well, I can raise my hand on that one. I have so much passion to create. And the step that I'm in my my pathways is about negotiation. And there are many different paths of negotiation. One would never set out to think that they have to negotiate with their inner critic. But we do, because this inner critic is a tyrant. And it has the ability to completely quelch all creativity whatsoever. And so I'm going to go into a little bit of reflection on the negotiation process, and finally come to what the Artist's Way has to say about it. In 2020, there was a revolutionary agreement that was struck called the Abraham Accord. And it was between the UAE and Israel and Bahrain. And since then, they have created a tremendous amount of commerce and trade, and many good things have come out of it. There were other negotiations with other Arab countries that Israel had fostered. Jordan in 1994, Egypt in 1979, and then Bahrain and the UAE in 2020, September 15th of 2020. And these historic landmark negotiations brokered by President Trump, whose negotiation tactics we've learned of late are probably, well, they're open for interpretation. I personally don't find them to be a negotiation tactic of my choosing. The Israeli cabinet approved unanimously on October 12th the Abraham Accord. That happens to be my birthday. So on August 16th, for the first time, there was telephone communication between Israel and the UAE. To imagine that that line of communication had never been established. These people could not communicate with one another on any level. On August 31st, the first commercial flights from Israel to the UAE took place. And the first ship carrying cargo from the UAE to Israel occurred also on my birthday. What does this show us? That when we begin to negotiate with the part of us that has been oppressive and said, no, you're not good enough. No, artists don't make a living. You can't do that. When we begin to do that, those communication pathways begin to open up. And we may even be able to move into commerce and trade. And I want to look at the recent film Elvis. Elvis had a manager. And again, I'm referring to the inner critic. Okay, so I'm looking at this in terms of how does this apply to me as an artist, to you as an artist. Elvis had a manager, Colonel Tom Parker, and he negotiated. For the first time, Bert was telling me he saw Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was the talk of the town. How he moved his hips, and he was out in the creating the splash with the ladies all over the country. Nothing like it had ever been seen. Colonel Tom Parker was a tremendous asset to creating a line of communication between Elvis and the American people and the world. But Elvis wasn't able to negotiate his own freedom, his own artistic freedom within that, and he felt oppressed by it. He was able to be creative, and that's one of the important parts, to understand that we can, this part of us, this sort of taskmaster within us, that is the critic, will in fact become a great asset, a great companion, a great partner, if we learn to negotiate with it. And beginning in the very first steps of the artist way, it suggests that we start with morning pages. Why do we start with morning pages? We start because every single day we sit down and write 3 pages without considering, what am I writing? Is it good? Is it good enough? I don't know if it's interesting. I don't know if it's poetic. No, you write whatever you want. You write silly things, complaining things, things that are any observation, anything, because what you're training yourself to do is get past the critic, allow the critic to just go along for the ride, because the artist is in charge now. And it's an exquisite experience. I've been doing it. I find a great deal of resistance to it. And each day I find that as I do it, my creativity is beginning to open up. So that is the very first task in this artist's way. Start with your morning pages. Start negotiating with your critic. Start listening to your critic. Write down the words that your critic is saying while you are writing. And I think you'll begin to start negotiations with your inner critic and be creative again. So I hope that this very first introduction to the artist's way will inspire you to become more creative. And I hope that I can share with you more in the coming weeks. Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster.